All right, well, I've been setting up in the back there. I've been really enjoying the TED Talks today, and we've had some quality presentations. And my presentation that I was asked to give is entitled Bring Your Own Device, A Cautionary Tale. And the original version of this is done over a 1 hour period, much the same way that Dick Hart did his presentation that was famous 7 or 8 years ago, where if, as has been mentioned, a picture is worth 1,000 words, he covered 500,000 words in under 12 minutes and kind of proved that everything we knew about PowerPoint was wrong. But I'm going to change mine just a little bit because we obviously don't have an hour. And I'm going to skip a great deal of the first part of that presentation, which basically justifies who I am and why I have any chance of being here. And you'll just have to trust me, but I'm going to use this as my cred slide. I grew up in northern Arizona near Lake Powell, and this is known by the locals as cliff jumping, okay? Very technical term. And as a child, this is what I loved to do. My mother would take us down there. And this is a chance for me to also recognize my mother. She's the original author, in my mind, of the cautionary tale, okay? Because what we would do is, no matter how excited we were to get to the lake, when we would get to the lake and you wanted to just jump, she wouldn't allow us. She made us go down, and either she did it or we had to go down. And you had to first swim around, and you had to look for dangerous things. Now, some of you may have noticed in the corner of this picture, there's a dangerous thing just under the corner of the surface of the water. And for those of you who don't know, Navajo sandstone has a tendency to crack off, as you can see in the photo. And then it drops into the lake. It does two things. Number one, it creates a big object down there. But number two, it puts a lot of sediment in the water. And so even though it looks clear, your visual acuity is only about 10, 12 feet. And what some of you may not have seen, see if this works, is just off that rock is this rock. And that's the one that gets you, okay? So there's a moment in time when you're able to learn, and that learning moment is sometimes very swift. We used to go to the lake, and I used to think, why can't I jump? Other people would show up and just bail off, and I'd think, look, their mom doesn't do mean things to them, you know, sort of thing. And there's this moment where, thanks to the acoustical properties of water, if you happen to be under the water submerged, and someone a little farther down from you, say no wider than this stage, happens to jump, the amount of time it takes for your mother to move from a purveyor of a cautionary tale to the conveyor of a life lesson is exactly as long as it takes to hear the initial splash and then the shattering of the bone. And in that moment, you learn things. Now, what does that have to do with where I'm going today? As they mentioned, I happen to have been the IT director for a number of years in one of the larger school districts in the nation. We have over 70,000 students in more than 80 locations. And this is a thing that's been keeping me up late at night for a long time. And what this is we've been starting to keep track over the last few years of the number of devices that join our network right after Christmas that don't belong to us, okay? And so not knowing when we started what we should compare it against, because, you know, a 1 bar chart just doesn't do anything. You gotta have more than 1 bar. We did this blue line up here that you can see, where that's if you had a business and you were getting a 50% annual growth curve, right? That'd be pretty good. You'd be happy all the way to the bank. And then we put in the red line, which is 100% annual growth curve. And the yellow line is the actual growth curve. And the reason that terrifies me is because of this. And this is the actual pie chart that we use in our district to demonstrate this, but I'm going to use it in sort of a strange way. I'm going to compare it to education, I hope. But this works with anything, a car, a house, whatever. But on the one side in the big blue is the initial cost of the device. So what it costs you to buy the car, right? The other side is the things you don't think about. My son just bought a car, and he's not quite aware of the other side yet, but he's going to be, okay? Because the things on the other side are the things that you don't really think about. You think about taxes, or insurance, or oil and gas, right? Gas. Over the lifetime of a car, gas can be quite a big piece of that, right? So when these devices come into your network, it's called the total cost of ownership. And I would submit that in most of our districts across the nation, the discussion is not on the right piece of the pie. Everybody is talking about the devices and how are we going to get the devices. My geek friends are going to hate this because I crunched down about 40 slides into just 3, but work with me. It's close enough, okay? The biggest thing you're going to have to worry about is that these devices run on wireless. And although you can't see wireless, it's a wave that passes through the air, much like a ripple you know in a pond, right? And as long as you're the only one using it, then it's like this Zen garden. Things are great, okay? But the reality is that most of you are trying to do something like this, where every room has an access point and all of you are interfering with each other. So the way around it, geek-wise, is you have to change the frequency and people go, ooh, he's going technical. No, it's like crayons, okay? Colors are different frequencies, and as long as you color the rooms in different colors, you'll be okay, except that you only have a 5-pack of crayons. And some of my geek friends are rolling their eyes. Trust me, it's close enough to the truth, okay? Well, we're talking about the red piece, and so there's a lot of money that goes into buying all this stuff. And then you have to run it, even though it's wireless to the ceiling, you have to run a cable back to the main closet. And when you get there, like they did in this case, and those 35 cables are now hanging in the closet, what are you going to plug them into? Because that's already full of your other wires. So then you got to get geek stuff, you know, the routers and the network cables and all that kind of stuff. If you solve that problem, which by the way is dollars, right? You guys are getting this equates to dollars. Then somewhere you got to get enough pipe to run that in your building. So even though it's not your problem, somebody somewhere is putting it in the ground so that you can use it, right? That whole thing turns into the red piece of the total cost of ownership. And that slide deck I had that I gave the hour speech on covers all of those pieces in great detail. But as we move through this and we talk about where we're going, what I had to do is I had to project this. What would it look like? And really, I was just worried about the first 4 bars, the first 4 years. But I figured I'd kick it out there 8 years just because. And people laughed at that growth curve, and they said, you're out of your mind. And then this happened. I'll point out that on this particular slide, the last bar there is not a full year. We haven't got to Christmas yet. And what that looks like is we completely skipped those, and this is where we're at. And that's the kind of stuff that geeks like me get to lay awake at night and worry about, right? But as I came here to rehearse, in order to go through that many slides, you have to practice. I got here and I was all excited with my laptop and I was ready to go, and I got into this auditorium and here we were. And it turned out that I had a little bit of a problem because I couldn't read a calendar. I got here on the wrong day. Everybody else wasn't here. And so, yeah, you adds your confidence in my skill set, doesn't it? So I'm sitting right here on this stage, okay? And I had an interesting thought, and that was, if I get it to come up, that's not the reason that we went to the lake. And it was such a profound thought that I was scurrying around looking for something. Here I am in this auditorium with nobody in it and no tech, and so literally I found this. And for those of you that can't see it, I have a slide. This is a busted orange crayon that was sitting right here on the floor that day. And then I scrounged up this, which came from this corner. I don't want to diss on the janitor. I'm very grateful that he left it there, but it was found on the floor, okay? And I feverishly wrote notes about that thought that came to my mind. It's easy to say all the reasons why this won't work. But we didn't go to the lake to look for rocks, right? We went to the lake to swim and to cliff jump and to have fun. And so as we talk about the total cost of ownership, it occurred to me that we're not talking about the stuff that's really important, that upper 3 pieces, because really you don't have any control over whether or not your district's buying all these things or whether or not the kids are just bringing them. And you don't have a lot of control about the wiring and the cabling and the software, and boy, there's a whole bunch of stuff we could go into on that, about which vendors do what with their, and how that's going to change our textbook purchasing. But what you do control is your teachers. And I want to go back to that moment, that micro moment, when what my mother said became a reality. Some of you know the story of Helen Keller and how she tried for months to reach a mind of Annie Sullivan that was encased in darkness. And she couldn't find the mind. And how in that one moment with the water, with no other tech than running water in her hands, she reached a mind. And I would submit to you that that's what teachers do best. You use what you have, and you go to where the mind is, and you find it and you try to lead it to somewhere else. That's what we do. That's why we do what we do. This is a picture. It's worth 1,000 words. But in this case, it's worth 6. There's a famous story or legend about Ernest Hemingway. Some of you may know this. That once he was challenged by his friends to do a complete story in 6 words. And on the back of a napkin at a coffee shop, he wrote, "For sale, baby shoes, never worn." If that doesn't bring something to your mind, you need to check and see if you still have a pulse. I would submit that what he did there is what we need to do. We need to quit the discussion about the blue and the red and the whatever, and we need to focus on what we're about. He focused an entire story into 6 words. And he also provided us potentially with a pattern. And my English friends are going to roll their eyes like my geek friends. But he's divided it into 3 sections, okay? And I would like to submit something. And that is that instead of wondering about bring your own device, maybe we've missed the point. At least on the secondary level, they're already bringing their own device. And what do? We tell them to turn it off and put it away. Because we haven't put in that kind of focused thinking on how we could use it. But I submit, Mr. Hemingway also provides us with perhaps a possible template. These run on apps. And I'll tell you right up, if you try to make me go to a browser on this thing, I'll quit. That's not what they were designed for. But apps are different. And I don't have this worked out, I'll tell you straight up, but this is what I've been focused on for a little while. Let's say that the first part is the kind of apps that I can do in my classroom to just simply enhance what I've already got. The next section might require a little bit of creativity on my part, maybe the use of my teacher laptop, but none of this requires the last section, which is actually connecting to the internet. See, everybody's terrified that they're going to connect to the internet with these, and then we have security and stuff. I say, forget that. Just work on the first 4. Is that okay? Let me tell you what I'm thinking. I've read a lot of grants in this position, both state and federal and whatever. You know the number of people that apply for a set of graphing calculators as a grant? $10,000 so that I can have graphing calculators. Did you know you can get them for free? You can go out and download 6 different graphing calculators for your phone right now. Would that be useful or valuable in your classroom? Now, I'm not connecting to the internet. I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just using that, okay? How many times have we written grants for digital cameras, right? If everybody in my classroom had a digital camera, or maybe a movie, oh, heaven forbid. Every freaking smartphone on the planet does this. Why are we, and then we look at each other like, no, I need a grant. Really? Why aren't we having this discussion? Now, then you move to something else. This is a great example that I heard recently, where a teacher used the recorder, just the voice recorder. There again, there's 100 of these out there, right? And what they did is in a younger class, and they had the standard back to school night where you paint the picture, right? This is my artwork, they had the student tell about it, right? They recorded it. Then the teacher had to go to her laptop and she had to post these somewhere on the web. Okay, that's that middle piece, right? But then what she did is in the corner of each one of these, she printed a QR code. So when she hung them in the hallway, it was like the Metropolitan. You just come along as a parent, you scan the QR thing, and the child talks to you about the artwork. Are you kidding me? And we're not to the get on the internet thing yet. We're just using the devices they have, right? So eventually you say, well, all right, what would that entail? You know, this is the toughest part. I don't know, but I'll bet it entails some sort of reference. How many times have we said, I hate to go down to the library and look up the encyclopedia? Well, if all they did was do reference to an online encyclopedia, would that be useful? So here's a couple of options about how this might look, right? And I just threw them together and said, maybe it looks like this. And then I said, oh, I don't know, maybe it looks like this. By the way, that middle one is a translate thing, the language translation. Wouldn't that be really cool? Okay, mapping, whatever. Again, I don't know what this looks like, but here's what I do know. And this came from a little thought experiment that someone shared with me. Let's say that no one in this valley had a cell phone today. They don't exist. I know it's a stretch, but work with me, okay? And tomorrow they're going to go out and they're going to buy whatever's available. So the brand new iPhone, the brand new Samsung, the brand new whatever, okay? What happens in 18 months? They're going to get a new one. And what are they going to do with the old one? They're going to give it to their kid, who's going to show up in your room, right? And you're going to be able to do this. Now, for those of you that say, well, that's a stretch, I've cheated here. This is actually not my phone, okay? My phone looks like this. And it now comes in 3 pieces, okay? And the reason for that is 6 weeks ago, I jumped out of a truck in the middle of a rainstorm. There's a lot of extenuating circumstances, but I got washed down a river about 3/4 of a mile, and where I was promptly run over by a vehicle, okay? So, and you say, why do you have this? Well, I'll tell you why I have this, because at the time I was only 2 months from getting a new one. So I went to my daughter, who's a sophomore in school, and I stole it back, the one I had given her a couple of years ago. So I am walking embodiment of this. In 2 weeks, I'm going to get the new one. This is the one in between, and this is the one that my daughter has in your rooms. And that little experiment I did with the Hemingway, I did it all on this. On the 3rd generation of phone. What I would submit to you in the closing minute I have is it just like when I chose to use what was available to me at the moment. Give your kids the chance to use what they have. No, not every kid is going to have a nice phone. And especially if you're on the elementary level, it's going to take a little while to trickle down. I get that. But how long is it going to take? 18 months? 36 months? It's not going to take 5 years. And I promise you, if you will let them use what they have, tomorrow they will bring something better. Thank you for your time today.